Kundalini is impossible as a process to go through without that one-pointed attention, which in itself requires a certain degree of discipline over the patterns that would outlive themselves or be reintegrated or dissolved. But one way or another, some of these patterns will remain to be as obstacles. So we can't first eliminate these obstacles for the Kundalini to, as it were, unfold in her full glory. It's the other way around. It is the Kundalini as consciousness in us, as consciousness that governs all these processes, impacts everything from within to without, that is responsible for what we then feel as the fruits of that awakening, living this life in that state of being consciousness bliss. Aligning outer circumstances and dedication to the Kundalini process. There's quite a bit of background. I received Shaktipat 3 months ago through the Siddha Yoga tradition, and shortly after I found you, which I consider being divine timing. As I quickly learned that there is more to this process than I just receiving Shaktipat, and that my goal is to assist this process so as for it to be successful. This September I was hoping to train in a modality misleadingly referred to as Kundalini Activation, or known as KAP, Kundalini Activation Process, which is not true Kundalini activation, but facilitating pranothana, as far as I understood from one of your online deliveries. During a private Zoom session with one of your facilitators, they mentioned the concept of karmic transference, which happens when any kind of energy work, and advised that I would experience the most growth on this journey when not facilitating for others, just like they had gone through. Now I find myself faced with the predicament of potentially giving up the KAP training in September so that I could focus on my own Kundalini process with you and your immersions. If I go ahead with this training and then continue to facilitate this energy work for others, it may disrupt my process, if I understand this correctly. I recently discovered you on YouTube and felt immediate resonance, and am grateful for your teachings and how they are taught. So a very deep thank you. I've been working my way through the Kundalini course and hope very much to join you in Germany for the immersion. I have 2 questions. What importance should be given to changing life circumstances for more happiness before dedicating oneself wholeheartedly to the Kundalini process? And 2, how does facilitating or even receiving pranic energy work affects the personal Kundalini process? Okay, so very valid questions here. And perhaps I will reflect to that what you brought out into the open, your considerations for taking the Kundalini activation process modality and becoming one of its instructors or teachers, facilitators. So, yes, of course, I've heard about this and have seen many videos on YouTube. It came out approximately, I don't know now, time flies, maybe 6 years ago or so, maybe before, but I don't think this modality was out there further than that in time. 10 years ago, there was no KAP. And the founder of that method seems like a very, very nice, very beautiful person, beautiful being. But I want to clarify because some of people in our own Sangha, let alone team members have asked me about this when they encountered it many years also online. What do I think about it? Like this kind of methodologies were coming to their towns and becoming available. So of course I had to look it up. And yes, it is incorrect and misleading potentially to call it Kundalini activation for these very reasons that you aligned and outlined in your background, because it's not a Kundalini activation. It's really an activation of prana. It is a very similar activation of prana that takes place when one is exposed to pranic healing or more advanced levels of healing via Reiki. It's very well known. People begin to shake, move, their body spines arches, there's shaking of the limbs and all kind of potential movements that are being seen as if orchestrated by the hand of the facilitator. What was immediately what brought my, let's say, sense of both curiosity and not suspicion, but rather amazement at why would that be called Kundalini activation if all this taking place with those who undergo this whilst they're lying down on the floor. The fact that they use certain music as well and certain gigahertz sound pitch, all that is in all this brought together gives a great sense of suspicion that this has anything to do with Kundalini activation whatsoever. To begin with, proper yogic processes are all required to have upright spine. Spine acts here as an antenna. The Sushumna pathway here and the very, very modality of that, what orchestrates these movements, both the descending movement and the ascending movement, requires to have a free, upright position of the spine. And all this laying down on the floor in kind of a submissive, receptive state has, well, yes, it hopefully has great therapeutic applications, perhaps some healing that is accompanied by that, because whenever the bodies move, shake, vibrate, this is accompanied by a release of certain information field held at the level of the somatic resonance. So, of course, I don't want to at all sound as if I'm dismissing this methodology. This methodology has its place and value, certainly. But calling it Kundalini activation is indeed erroneous and potentially misleading. But I will leave that to the founders and people who involved with that. With regard to your own questions here, and all I could do, of course, is to encourage you to join us in one of our forthcoming programs for you to simply have first-hand experience with that, and you will be able to see the difference. You'll be able to sense the difference. Now, more specifically to your questions, what importance should be given to changing life circumstances for more happiness before dedicating oneself wholeheartedly to the Kundalini process? Well, it's a kind of chicken and egg story here. Really, if we understand, and you certainly will have this aplenty as you are taking the Kundalini course that we have offered since 2021, and now working on the book, which is based on the course, but in its edited, expanded version. This, what we speak of as personal happiness, as sense of fulfillment, is all interlinked intimately and is inseparable from the or to the degree to which Kundalini is awakened. So it can be spoken from that esoterically used language, from that perspective, that when we speak of, let's say, that more of a daily, casual language, we use these words: happiness, fulfillment, right? Balance, joy. We speak about it as not necessarily using any lofty concepts or using some kind of specific esoteric language pertinent to certain tradition. But all this can also be, of course, spoken from the behind the scenes. What is at work when we feel sense of balance? What is behind the scenes that influences that state of affairs in our neurophysiology, that gives us that visceral, tactile, somatic even sense of happiness and joy? Because it's not just a mental concept. It's not just some kind of self-induced hypnotherapy that we are happy because we're smiling, and because we're smiling we must be happy. All this has its own place, but that sense of happiness is self-evident because it arises from within, and it is an outcome, a result of a harmonious interchange of all the activities in the neurophysiology, which is primarily governed by functioning of the endocrine system, which in turn is rooted in electrical responses, of which Kundalini is the chief of all these responses. So all this, what effectively speaking, from the behind the scenes can be seen as electric in nature, becomes hormonal in nature, and that hormonal in nature translates into that well-beingness or sense of well-being in terms of how we feel in our own skin, in our own body, in our interactions, in our situations, and how well fit we are to meet life's challenges, how well we are to fit to be in relationships, and so forth. So really, what I mean by that is that there is no such thing as what can be changed in one's life for more happiness before dedicating oneself wholeheartedly to Kundalini process, simply because, may I say, it's the other way around. So in other words, unless there is more consciousness in us, unless there is more awareness, we cannot really place the cart before the horses to drive it forth, to drive it through, to drive it along of what we call this, let's say, a life. This life journey is driven by the force that behind the scenes of all this, what we then call and enumerate and refer to as the aforementioned qualities of how we experience life. So therefore, all is required is simply that wholeheartedness, clarity of understanding, ability to surrender, acceptance, all these qualities, dedication, discipline, of course. Kundalini is impossible as a process to go through without that one-pointed attention, which in itself requires a certain degree of discipline over the patterns that would outlive themselves or be reintegrated or dissolved. But one way or another, some of these patterns will remain to be as obstacles. So we can't first eliminate these obstacles for the Kundalini to, as it were, unfold in her full glory. It's the other way around. It is the Kundalini as consciousness in us, as consciousness that governs all these processes, impacts everything from within to without, that is responsible for what we then feel as the fruits of that awakening, living this life in that state of being consciousness bliss. And with regard to facilitating or receiving pranic energy work, it depends on the acuity of the process. Receiving, for example, at the end of our programs, if these programs are very intense, just to switch off this Siri. So, at the end of our programs, questions often ask, can I receive psychic healing, or can I go to this, let's say, energetic workshops? And I always advise after the programs, after our live immersions, to give it sometimes enough time to integrate what one went through in our programs before checking oneself into yet another energy-based tantric retreat, or what have you. However, receiving certain, let's say, therapeutic modalities like sacrocranial therapy, let alone professionally administered massages, some other maybe energy work, is fine, as long as it's not based on anything too, forgive me, new agey. I would not recommend anything when people begin to work with crystals on your chakras, begin to kind of pretend that they can align the activity of the supreme centers, that they can somehow assist, speed up, slow down, or facilitate release of some information from the wheels of energy, because all this is a mumbo-jumbo of a new age. The only access to that is given by Kundalini herself when she awakens and goes through the centers by activating them in the first place. All this is in my Kundalini course, and I'm sure when you come to that point, it will bring you great clarity on the process. Being involved as a facilitator in working with others, more demanding, obviously. So if you are working as a healer, as an energy therapist, you need to know where you are in the process. If your process is steady, it's not accompanied by any peaks and valleys, if there's no, let's say, this ups and downs, and you are kind of integrating each phase and you feel confident and steady, and there is this reservoir of energy, there's enough prana, there's enough tejas, there is enough ojas, you can continue working with others. But at some point, if you feel that there is this strain, tension, which begins to contribute to the, well, frankly, accumulation of cortisol and all that stress hormones, then one needs to find a way of how to balance this act. In the, let's say, ensuing phases, and I understood that you went through the Shakti path in the Siddha Yoga tradition. I don't know, you didn't specify whether this Shakti path was administered by facilitators of Siddha Yoga or by the Guru Maya Chidvilasananda herself. I know she's not publicly active and working only from behind the scenes in her own ashrams. So, but it doesn't matter. Once you come to the immersion in Germany, a lot of your questions will be answered there and then, without even you asking these questions. So I trust this shall suffice to give you enough to reflect on.